My name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to today's Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation. And don't forget you can contact us as well by email ogc@accessradio.biz, and biz is spelled B-I-Z. So please enjoy today's guest, who has been at the forefront of some very important Christian ministries here in the UK. He started a printing career, which included the legendary Buzz magazine, and was with Peter Meadows when launching Spring Harvest. Our guest then went on to become a director of Spring Harvest. He's also been on the board for Luis Palau, Spurgeon's College, and was secretary at Evangelical Alliance. His comment, though, about his heart attack being the best thing that ever happened to him needs to be discussed. But on a happier note, his passion includes watching a certain football team, especially when he was a season ticket holder. I might even forgive him for his team beating us in a playoff final in Cardiff. I was there. We were awful that day. So, what advice would our guest give to people today starting or wanting to start a Christian ministry? What would he do again but differently if given a chance? What does he think of Christian ministries today, especially regarding evangelism? And why was that heart attack the best thing that ever happened to him? Gives me great pleasure today to talk to Colin Saunders. Colin, thank you so much for joining us today. For those that know nothing about you, and this might give a clue as to who you support, where are you based, good sir?
Well, I'm down in East Sussex, a little place called Heathfield. Comes up on the daily weather forecast occasionally, because it's right in the centre between Tunbridge Wells and East.
That doesn't give a clue away to your football team, though, does it? So,
no, it doesn't actually. If I said Tunbridge Wells and Brighton, it's not far out.
Especially if it was Brighton and Hove, of course.
Oh, yeah. Brighton and Hove by Jove.
Do they still speak like that down there?
What the Hove
They
people
do.
do.
Whereas Brighton's more sort of almost like Cockney London still, isn't it?
That's right.
Let's go for the 5 interrogated questions, if that's right, so we can learn a bit more about you. Colin, question number 1. If you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask him questions, who would it be, please?
I really value you giving me the opportunity to invite somebody. And with what's going on and what's been going on in the last 12 months, there's a certain said gentleman I'd love to sit down with, and that's Donald
You are the
Trump.
second person to say that.
I can't help thinking that we all exclaim when he comes on the television and does a newscast. And where does he get it all from? Where does he? I mean, he's obviously a genius in some way or another. I mean, a fantastic brain, and yet at the end of the day, he just seems a complete idiot.
In your opinion, I'll just put that in for the lawyer's sake.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I should say. Yeah, it's in my opinion. But I guess if I started a party up, I could get a good following. You say, what questions would you ask him if you were sitting with him? I think one of the areas that I struggle with, I mean, he from the evangelical stream or side, or so-called, or is he clever enough to side with both? But when you see the Graham, or some members of the Graham organisation, siding with him and supporting him, you kind of begin to ask a few questions. And there must be a depth of faith in him. But again, he's a very clever man. Very clever. I guess it would be quite difficult to ask him a question, because if he couldn't answer it, he'd say something and take you off stream immediately.
Well, you would also know how well you got on with him, because like a month's time, you might turn around and say, in his American accent, I spoke to Colin Saunders. And if he repeats it twice, then you know you're okay. So if you say, I spoke to Colin Saunders, he was brilliant, a brilliant man, then you know you've done well. But if he doesn't say that...
Yeah, well, it could have been the food I'd served.
Well, that was my next question. What were you going to cook him?
Well, McDonald's, I think. I'd have it brought in.
Very good. Was it last week? He went into a local McDonald's, didn't he? So he could buy some stuff to take on the plane. I don't know whether the plane had been parked outside the local McDonald's, it had landed on the roadside.
No, Uber delivered
Oh, there you go. That'd be good. And with a chocolate milkshake, of course.
That's right.
That's a good idea. Let me know how you get on with him, please. I'll be fascinated.
Okay.
And the previous guest said that he would ask this question. So when you do speak to him, can you ask him if I can come and have a round of golf with him as well, please, on one of his courses? Yeah.
Really?
Oh,
Which
any
one?
of them. I don't mind. I'm humble. I'll take any of those golf courses, especially in America. But obviously, he has to fly me over, of course. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable? Please, Colin.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of things when you get asked questions happen because of timing, as it was with Trump. Joseph is the person that I would choose as one of my favourites. Now, there's a reason for saying that, because just recently, my daily Bible readings have been going through the life of Joseph and his father Jacob.
You don't by chance use Daily Bread Bible Notes, do you? There you go. We're in Matthew this week.
Yeah, that's right. When I look on it, and in a way, the whole story of his life is an echo of, or a duplicate of where I've come from. You just see God leading and guiding through a whole lifetime. And I just find it fascinating. And the fact that how he went down into Egypt and then he got put into prison and he was there a time before he was brought out. Yeah, that's my favourite story.
That's a great answer as well. For me, going through said Bible notes last week, along with you, only like 300 miles different, what came across to me was that in his wilderness years, that's how I've been feeling. And I'm hoping that, my wilderness years are about to finish or maybe have finished. I'm starting off in the promised land sort of thing. So, it's a source of great encouragement, isn't it?
A new chapter.
Yes, I'll go for a new chapter.
Yeah. But the other thing is, Martin, it's how he handled himself when he came and he was faced with his brothers. I mean, he had a bit of a play with them, but he could have made life worse and just turned them off and said, go away. But there was something deeper with his whole soul and spirit.
Well, my good news is I haven't got any brothers, so I don't have to go through that. I know what you're saying. Forgiveness. There's certain people he has to forgive. Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Good answer. Question 3. If you were Prime Minister for the day, Colin, and could change any law or impose a new law, I will gladly accept a frivolous answer, as we could do with a bit of a laugh at the moment. What would it be?
It's interesting. I looked at that. My first reading was I started to think who the past Prime Ministers were. And I thought, heaven help us. It doesn't matter what persuasion they are. I mean, it's almost a poison chalice nowadays. But I think the one that I would really value guidance over, and it's all this about early dying. How is that going to be sorted out and seen through? Because, I don't know, the more I look around and I see some people with Alzheimer's and cancer, and you think, hang on, this is not what God wanted. Or is it? Or is that his plan? Where is it? And I just wish we could have some sensible, balanced understanding of this. And you'll get the same old situation. People will stand up in church and they will say, you can't do this or you can't do that. And I just find it terribly challenging. And I'd like to see that one sorted out. So in a way, we know what the situation is in this country.
Very good. And as I say to other people, good luck with getting that one sorted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to give me a frivolous one? A stupid one that because you're Prime Minister, you can put it through?
Well, first of all, that no idiots can be elected.
We're not going to have a government then, are we?
No, that's right. I actually went through and printed off a photograph of all the past Prime Ministers.
Yes.
Over in the 21st century and then the 20th and all the way back. And like when you see Rishi Sunak, Elizabeth Truss, Boris Johnson, bless him, and so on. I've got a lot of time for Gordon Brown. And the trouble is, the more you move on in history, more things come out of the woodwork that you can't, hang on a minute, this was not so good. Yeah, the thing would be, how can we have a system where no idiots are elected?
I think I've got more chance of playing golf with Donald Trump than that law going through. But yes, it's a nice thought.
Well, yeah. He might want to know what your handicap was.
Yeah, it's not good at the moment. Well, I thought I was playing brilliantly 3 weeks ago. Question 4. Outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out so far, Colin, please?
Could I change your question?
Go for it.
To say most enjoyable days
go for it.
In a way, you may have thought I was going to give you a fun day and everything else, but in my lifetime, I've been very privileged because I've sat on various committees, and one of them was Compassion UK, and then Compassion in the United States. I was able to go to Ecuador and to India. Then we went over to Florida and spent time over there. And I think the enjoyable and some of the best times was when I went looking at the projects that Compassion was supported, and especially when we went to India, and I went with my wife on that one. She accompanied us, and it was really great to be able to go into their homes and see them. Yeah, enjoyable, but a wonderful experience.
I will allow that. The Ecuador capital's Quito, isn't it? Was that where you were based by chance? It's supposed to be a nice place.
Very nice. Yeah, up on the equator there, on
and
the
home
line.
of chocolate as well. Maybe I better not go there, otherwise I'll come back 2 stone heavier.
Well, that's right.
Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment, please?
It was difficult to try and sort this one out, but I'll tell you where it was, and it may not be embarrassing to some people, but what may come out in our conversation that I was involved in Spring Harvest, and the background that I came from was a non-charismatic background. So I would be known as a non-card carrying charismatic, if you see what I mean. Can I do a detour for a second?
Yeah, go for it, please.
The first meeting after I'd been appointed as chairman of Spring Harvest, the whole group had started to break up because of this charismatic and non-charismatic. And I chaired the next meeting. It was a time when we had to sort out, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to handle the phenomenal things that are supposed to happen in meetings where you get some people that can't even handle it? You know, people falling down and various things. And my first meeting then was, and a Bible reading I brought to them, unless 2 people can agree, they cannot walk together. So I said, you know, it's either us going forward together or going our own separate ways. So do we agree? And the simple thing that came out of that one, and this is not an answer to the question, is that we said, in the instance that we're in, whenever we're up on a platform, if something's going to happen which might embarrass somebody, explain it. Tell the people what is likely or could happen or what it's all about. Well, my embarrassing one was, I was at Spring Harvest one evening for a evening celebration. This is when you get the absolute full house in there. R.T. Kendall was going to come on the platform. He wasn't speaking. Clive Calver said to me, would I go with R.T. Kendall and be with him? Because he was known at that time as a non-card carrying charismatic. So I stood up on the front row with R.T. Kendall at this big worship service, 4,500 people there, with all the people around clapping and hands up in the air. And there's R.T. Kendall and myself, really not with our hands in our pockets, but hanging on to our hymn sheets. And I think as I look back then, that was an embarrassing situation. And in a way, it shouldn't have been, but it was.
Yes, because obviously we've moved on since then. But why did you feel it was embarrassing at the time?
Because I'd have said probably 75, 80% of the people in the big top were raising their hands, dancing around and everything else, and on the platform alongside us. So with the orchestra and the people leading it, they were all prancing around. And we kind of stood there grounded. But it's, you know, one of those things.
Yeah.
I look back now, it doesn't worry me at all.
But at the time, because Spring Harvest in the early days, it was groundbreaking. So it was like bring these 2 factions together.
Yeah.
What did R.T. Kendall think about it?
I don't know, but I got into a good friendship with him and his good lady, a lovely guy. But he's got an interesting path because he's with the Word and the Spirit. He preaches a lot on that. When he comes over. Still comes over here regularly.
He does.
Yeah.
No doubt we will talk more about Spring Harvest in the early days. By the way, which Spring Harvest was it? Bearing in mind they had a few bases in those days. Where did this happen?
That was at Minehead.
Just down the road from Bristol. I know that one.
Indeed.
Yeah. I've been to that one.
Never mind.
Ooh. Moving on. Let's just carry on if that's okay. You brought up the subject of a Spring Harvest. Looking back on it now and where it is today compared to how it started off, what do you think is the current state of Christianity in the UK?
Very difficult to analyse and to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we go back to the days of spring harvest, 79, that was the first one up in Prestatyn, there was evangelism going on in the nation. We'd had Billy over here, we'd had Luis Palau, and there was that sense of expectation. Nevertheless, there was very much a divide between the evangelicals and the traditionals. And one of the things that's happened, I think, since then is there's been a good, healthy coming together in a lot of areas. But at the same time, there have been quite a number of casualties where people just don't want it. And the irrelevance sometimes of, can I say, Anglicanism, the way they do it, the traditional way they do it. And I could talk to that at the moment because I attend an Anglican church. I wouldn't want to put too fine a point on it, but to say that my wife and myself are really struggling with it. But at the same time, when you talk to people and you meet people, there's so much good going on and there's some wonderful people in there. And I always remember that in our own town, I'd come back and I'd gone through all my business days and I was then working for Christian organisations. And I came back after the spring harvest, after I'd finished, I'd done my 20 years there. I'd come back and on the Easter Sunday, they did a walk in the town, a walk of witness. And the guy who led it was the Anglican priest. And I have to say, I got on really well with Simon. Incidentally, he's gone over to the Assemblies of God. But he was the best preacher in town. But he was high church. And he was incense and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this is what's causing some people, I think, to not take the church seriously sometimes. You know, there's so much tradition and all the things that go on. You know, why do we have to have the same old prayers every week? Why can't we have more extemporary praying in churches? There are questions that when you're sitting in the pew, you have to be ever so careful about raising your head above the parapet.
Well, this is it, isn't it? And where do you start on that subject? Maybe we'll find out more as we carry on this conversation, because I would like to glean more from you. You've mentioned a couple of companies and people that you've been with in all your working life. Let's go back in time, if that's all right, to when you first started up a printing company and got involved with Buzz magazine all those years ago.
Yeah.
For those that are thinking, yeah, well, I wish I could do something today in church, or I wish I could do something, but I feel God is calling me to do this, or I feel God is calling me to do that. What advice would you give them, first of all, please?
Very difficult question, that, you know.
Because
when I left school at 16, that was 1956, and I really have had a good innings, because I'm knocking on 86 now.
Yeah.
I left school and I walked home, and somebody said, well, what are you going to do for a living? And I said, I haven't got a clue. I really had not. What I did know, but it didn't mean much to me, my father owns the premises of a printing works and the premises of a furnishing shop. Eventually, I got a job in a printing works in Lewes, near Brighton. Then after I'd done my time and everything else, at the age of 63, my dad said, well, do you want your own business? Because I got the opportunity of buying this business out. And I said, well, sorry, I'm not answering your question directly, Martin.
That's right, carry on, it's good.
I said, if we do, I've been working at a company which was burnt down, and it's got all the new modern equipment in it. I don't see how I could do it without new modern equipment. Well, he said, be a bit patient, he said. Let's make some profit first before we start investing in new machinery, i.e. German Heidelberg machines and those sorts of things. And it all happened that at the end of the day, it worked out that I met with people. And you say, how would you advise people today? I think you've got to actually make friends of people and be very sociable and find out about people and look out opportunities. I see it in my sons. They actually, all three of them, got their own three separate businesses in print or communications or something. And they all make friends of people, whether they're Christians or non-Christians. One of my sons is going over to Paris, is it, the rugby over there? He's going with one of his clients, you know, making friends. But at the end of the day, you find all these things almost come together. And that's why I love that story about Joseph. All these things, they all kind of come together. You see God's hand of economy, God's hand of weaving, planning, and guiding, that at the right time, things happen like that. I mean, I can only go back and say that's what happened with my father, because he got friendly with a guy called Leslie Edgell, who headed up British Youth for Christ in this country, down in Eastbourne.
Yeah.
What happened when I got going on in printing, the magazine that Youth for Christ was doing had to go bust. My dad said, well, look, let's get in and see if we can help them. And in fact, at the end of the day, we had to pull the rug from under their feet. But they also had been speaking to Peter Meadows, who was producing Buzz magazine in its very, very early days. And Pete asked me to go and meet him in London. And from there, he came down to see us. And the contract for Buzz came to us from there. And it was always meeting people, knowing who they were, because, I think you've got to be making friends with people, and not for just one purpose alone, but at the same time, almost opening yourself out that God should lead and guide. I always used to pray when I went off in the mornings. I mean, we were down in Heathfield. I mean, you said, where is Heathfield? And exactly where is Heathfield? I used to have to go to London 3 or 4 times a week to see the clients. But I always used to pray, as I got to a certain place, the prayer, oh Lord, grant me success today. And that was from the forefather of Jacob, when the servant went out looking for a wife.
I being in the way of the Lord.
Yeah.
Is the old-fashioned version, isn't it?
Yeah, the Lord led me. I used to pray for success. And so often I came back and it happened. That would be my advice to people today. But you see, how do I extend that across? I'm talking from a business perspective. And it's interesting how it links up later on. So if you get a young person in a church, let's say they want to go into the ministry, or they want to be in music or something like that, they've got to sensibly chart how they can find somebody that can walk alongside them. They need a friend, a partner, an advisor. And that's what I would advise anybody, to make sure you've got a running mate.
In your case, it was your father, because you were going back into the printing business, so he was able to guide.
Yeah.
Very wise words. Is that why do you think we see burnout so often, and people that we think were successful in the Christian ministry then falling back big time? Maybe the press had picked up on a bad story about him or her. Could that be one of the reasons why? That they just shot to fame very quickly in the Christian media, but they didn't have any backbone or didn't have a proper mentorship? What do you think?
Difficult question, because various people, your mind goes around and thinking. Because I was down in Heathfield, or I am down in Heathfield today. Yeah. Most of my friends are north of the Watford Gap, if I can put it that way. They're in London. Or you get like Popey up in Dudley. Yeah. and those sorts of people. You just need somehow to have somebody you can lift the phone and talk to, or you can go and have a cup of tea and a coffee and just have a good old moan about somebody, because sometimes we can't even let off steam. Oh, that's ungodly to do that. You mustn't do that. If we're struggling, and the psalmist does tell us sometimes, you can go and be honest with God. And some people just do not cope with that. They cannot see how you can be honest and straightforward with the Lord and tell him what's really biting you.
Yeah.
Dave Pope and myself, whenever we can, and it's not very often nowadays because of geography, get the same with Ian Coffey. It's good to be able to sit down and talk with them.
Yeah.
I would dare to ask the question, and you may want to not even record this bit.
Oh, carry on.
Who is Steve Chalk's mate, his running mate? I bet he's lost a good one in Peter. And although theologically they had to keep themselves in distinct camps, they were good mates to each other.
Yeah.
And I feel sorry for Steve sometimes. I got a lot of time for him.
Yes, absolutely. And that was the great thing about it, that despite everything, Steve had someone who was older than him, where they became really good, close friends.
Yeah.
And they might be theologically different on many points, but they were there for each other.
Yeah.
And Steve knew, I would have thought, that he could just pick the phone up at any time to Peter and just go, bleh.
Yeah.
I get that, because looking back in my life to date, like you say, I've always had someone close by me, and to such a degree that when I eventually married my wife, she was told in no uncertain terms what I was like.
Yeah.
But that was done in love from a chap who I always considered to be my Christian mentor. And I've got the same thing today. I've got 3 or 4 people who I meet weekly,
Yeah.
just to do the same sort of thing, just go, ugh,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm in the safe confines. They know who I am. They know what I'm like. They're prepared to listen, but they also know that I will listen as well as to what they're saying.
Sure.
So taking that a bit further forward then, maybe that could be an issue why we don't see the Christian ministry succeeding these days, because they don't have a place of security to vent their angst. Or maybe they've been told they can't vent their angst because that's ungodly. What do you think?
It's an interesting question, and there's an element of knowledge where you're coming from in saying that, because our previous vicar, I said to him once, I said, if you ever want a shoulder to cry on or come and talk to somebody, I'm always there available to talk.
Yeah.
And he never came and talked, never did, but he did well and he was okay. You see, the problems that most of the vicars have got is that they so-called direct the people up the line, the archdeacons and the bishops and all those. And sometimes I think they haven't got a clue. I really do. I'm sorry. I really do struggle with it.
I have seen so many times over here, because like you, I've got a Methodist background, an Anglican background, Baptist background. I'm a bit of a mongrel, really.
Yeah.
I went to a Catholic school as well. So, yes,
Whoa.
I'm there. One of my best friends is an AOG minister. So, yeah, I think I've got the full house, really.
You have.
And I'm still confused. The thing is that I've seen personally vicars, ministers, whatever, coming in to a place thinking they know how to do it. And they're surrounded by nice, happy, smiley Christians who say all the right things. But as soon as that minister says something that they don't like, all of a sudden the backstabbing will start.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, where's this minister? Where's this vicar? Where's this pastor going to turn to? Where is the accountability for somebody to actually get into the proverbial pulpit and say, look, you lot, stop it. You wouldn't do this in a business environment. You might have a moan about your boss, but you wouldn't stab him in the back. Why? Because he pays you.
Yeah.
Where is your authority to stab this minister in the back? Sorry, I'm venting now, but that's how I feel.
No, you're right. You're right.
Tell us, what can we do today? Because I'm just seeing so many churches falling by the wayside, Christians falling by the wayside, hence this podcast, Off-Grid Christianity, for those that are burnt out but are desperate to see Christ through new eyes.
Yeah.
Off you go. Tell me.
It's interesting, before I get going and wind up, because in a way, I was leading or chairing Spring Harvest.
Yeah.
And we were on an away day. There were 2 guys leading it, and for the life of me, I forgot what their names are. Anyway, he sent us all out, all the people around the table, for 2 hours to go and think through and what was God saying to each one of us. For the first time in my life, and I was then mid-40s, I suppose, I just remember reading in Isaiah where God was saying, I will call you, you will open people's eyes, you will free people from their captivities, and those who sit in darkness will be set free. And I thought, hang on, and it came very much to me. And then I realised that I got to sell the business up. But my role was going to be going in to organisations and opening eyes and bringing people out of darkness. And that's, in fact, as I look back now, has been my journey all the time. And because I worked with organisations rather than churches, that was different. And I was away from Heathfield doing it. I still lived in Heathfield. But when I came back, and I'll bring it up to date a wee bit now, and I retired, whenever I went into a church, it didn't matter what church I was in, there was almost that sense of, hang on, this guy comes in, are we going to listen to him? And there was a jealousy of leadership to me. And I still get that today. And it makes me want to run and not have anything to do with any of them, to be perfectly honest, where I've kind of organised a number of organisations, and reset them. And you sit in a church, and as you rightly say, if you go along to a minister, I mean, I'll tell you one example. Our minister is allowing a vision day to take place where all the church will be able to go to. And it's being led by 2 of the PCC members, not by himself. Now, that, in my mind, is a bit unwise. I would have said you need to bring somebody in with experience of doing that. How to get a church to take a vision forward. So I would love to come alongside the guy and say, look, invite a guest speaker. Invite somebody who knows what to do, how to do it. And look at it that way and think it through. But that's what I found, is that some of these people just don't want to hear from me or too much of my input, or when I get a bit creative and I keep asking, why haven't we done this or why haven't we done that? But I've been privileged, you see, Martin, in a lot of the things I've been able to do. I mean, when I went to EA, Evangelical Alliance, and I was on the council there, I always remember sitting in, and most of the people around the room were either in Christian ministry or vicars or anything. And I was a lay person, a business person. Mm-hmm. And they were fiddling around what to do about buying a property. They were in a property which they owned 23% of. And after we'd traipsed all around London trying to find suitable offices, I mean, a dozen of us traipsing around London, in the end I sat down, I said, why don't we do a reverse buyout? Well, what's a reverse buyout? I said, well, we'll buy it. I said, where are you going to get the money from? Well, they were the days you could go to the bank, get an overdraft, or you could go out as an appeal, or see whether the people want to do a deal in here. I kid you not, within 3 months, we got an agreement of what we were going to do. And Evangelical Alliance bought the premises down there near the Oval. And that was the way. But it was just sitting there and thinking it through. Bible Society was another one. I was on the council of the Bible Society, and Christian Resources Exhibition came up for sale. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting in, James Catford said, I think it would be good for the Bible Society to do it. So I said, I think it's a brilliant idea. How does it tie in with the Bible Society? And he said, well, there's lots of ways because it profiles the work. And as we came out, he said, I want you to do that. And he brought me in, and I went and worked for Bible Society for nearly 5 years. And I was director of CRE when it went from Gospatrick Hume down to the Bible Society.
But I think what you're trying to say here, and it's something that really annoys me at times, is that Christians get together, they do quite well, and they think then that because their particular ministry is doing well, they know it all. It's like, we know all about business, and actually you don't. And instead of using wisdom, like, well, let's bring somebody from outside to discuss it, we'll try and do it ourselves. Consequently, you traipsed around London for goodness knows how many hours, days, trying to find a property where actually, if you just sat down and discussed it properly, and I don't know, maybe even pray about it, I know that's a bit radical, you might have found the answer sooner.
Yeah.
Why is it that Christians have this attitude that we sort of know it all? Or maybe this is just a one or two isolated cases?
I'm going to give you another thought in there.
Go for it.
Well, succession policy is a thing on my lips.
And?
How many times do we let somebody retire and leave and move on from a very good ministry? Mm-hmm. Clive Calver leaves Evangelical Alliance in 1996 or 97. Uh-huh. Who was going to be his successor? Had we ever thought about it? Had we planned? Bible Society down there for their chairman. They know for the next 3 years who's going to be the chairman. But he's not the chairman, he's the deputy chairman. So that when he comes in as chairman, he doesn't have to run to catch up. And it's the same in local church. We don't think through who's going to be the next church warden or who's going to be the next. So are we kind of thinking through who's going to be the deputy organist? What are we doing about young people and going into training to come in to be a Bible reader in the church? We've got to think more of training and also of further afield what's going to happen over the hill. Because one of the things I've always looked at, I want to know what's happened, what is over the hill. I really do. That's one of my pet thoughts. I do want to know what's going to happen over the hill. And I know that is a God-given thing, but at the end of the day, I think God's used us and uses us in these situations whereby he causes us to use our sanctified common sense. And that's what a lot of us don't use.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because a very recent podcast that went out with Helen Fernandez, who's based in East End of London, she says that one of her pet gripes is basically that people have often in the past brought in an outsider to take a top job. And it's like, they don't know the company, they don't know how we do it. So her attitude, as she's risen through the ranks now, is that she would try to, as much as possible, because occasionally you would have to bring somebody from the outside.
Yeah.
She would try and train up the people that are lower down on the ladder and bring them up.
Yes.
With everything that they might be wrong about them, they're going to learn the processes. And for me personally, I know that I'm still here because of one particular boss. He knew I was a rough diamond in the making and gave me leeway, pulled me in when I needed to be tapped on the back, calm down, Martin, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But he could see something in me. When I was a training officer in the outside world, one of the big things was, if you're going to make a business and it fails, major respect to you if you climb back on the horse and get another business going, because you're going to learn from your previous mistakes.
Yes.
Sure, that can be applied to Christianity, can't it?
I don't see how it can't. It can do. It's got to be. And I think sometimes these are why some of these people have stopped going to church, many people. But I do think there is a lot of fallout after the COVID problem. Do you not think so?
You're not the first to say that.
I really do. And I believe there's what I call a BBC church out there. Not a Baptist church or an Anglican, there's a BBC church. And that's why I think, if I get a chance to talk about it, I'd tell a lot of people, you ought to be watching BBC Songs of Praise.
Because
at one time, there used to be 4 to 5 million people watching it. How many are now, I don't know. But they still continue it. And what I do find it interesting is the content is much better than it used to be. There's a lot of good spiritual stuff in there. And that's why I think there are a lot of BBC Christians. My kids, all our kids were brought up in the faith. I'm not going to say all of them are walking close beside God. Mm-hmm. It would be a lie for me to say so. But there's one that always listens to the 8 o'clock service in the morning on Sunday. And he always watches Songs of Praise. Now, interestingly, he was the one out of all 3 of the lads that didn't get baptized. And he talks to me about it all. And he sees it all at home on the box or on the wireless. I do think we ought to encourage people, and we shouldn't lose heart by the numbers going down. And another reason, Martin, why I say the things we do in church today should be good. If you're going to have a visual up on the screen behind you, it's got to be good as the BBC television. It doesn't matter what you do. It's got to be good. And we're not. Our sound systems, they crackle up. It used to be like the old missionary thing on a Monday night when the slides wouldn't go through.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a lot of areas where as churches, we got to up our game as well. And we want to have people in.
And the problem with sound desks, as I can attest, is a bit like the Anglican organist. You upset the sound desk man or the organist and you're out. And it's like, you don't even know how to operate a sound desk properly. So, and when someone does come in and show them how to operate it, they don't like it.
No, you're dead right.
Not that I'm speaking from personal opinion, of course.
I'll tell you a funny story on that.
Please.
Last week, we had what they call All Saints Week. So they do it a bit different and have a music group in rather than the organ.
Oh, very good.
But, do you believe it? They didn't put the mic up, did they? So it was halfway through that the guy comes out walking up and puts the mic up. But our 2 operators for the sound desk, both of them have got hearing aids. And they have problems in hearing. So the sound balance is a bit adrift sometimes. But there we are. Life is great. And I'll tell you what, without the grace of God, we would be completely up the creek.
We would. And I have to say, in the Outer Hebrides, where on Sunday, in particular churches there on the islands of Scotland, they don't sing, which is a brilliant idea because you don't have a sound desk. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the sound engineer because you don't need one. They might have a point there. Very quickly, before we go on to your issue with your heart attack and that amazing statement, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to you. I'm going to now make you in charge of the whole of the UK for all the churches. With all your experience so far and working to you, on a serious note, what one thing would you bring in where all the churches have to adhere to what you're saying, and hopefully it's based on Scripture? Just saying.
I mean, at the end of the day, we need to come back to the basis of the creed. I don't care whether you're Anglican, Catholic, or Free Church. The creed is brilliant. Now, we don't have to go through the whole one. We can have the small one that's been condensed. But I do believe everybody needs to agree to that. And on that basis, there has to be an understanding that we work to it. So that's got our faith sorted out. On the basis that our faith is understood, why do we have all these different denominations? I would want to say, let's have a church in each city, town, or village, not all these different ones. So bring us back to the local church, not the local churches. And so that at the end of the day, there is somebody who is appointed as the leader there, and it must be an appointment, probably from the local again, that leads that local fellowship. Now, you say, how does that work in London? Don't you break it up into districts? You have to be practical, and here's your practical Christianity comes in and the practicalities of life. But at the end of the day, delegation is one of the best things that we've got to learn. One of the guys, and I referred to him before, Leslie Edgell.
You mentioned him, yes.
Who used to work, one of the first directors for British Youth for Christ in this country. And he said to me, Colin, he said, when you get going, you've got to learn the art of delegation. And that's what we don't do. And we've got to delegate it all the way down. And the respect has got to be from those who are delegated the responsibility to respect those above you. So the art of delegation, and all gathered under one creed. That's where I think I would start. You get a bit of a massive job, you know.
Well, you could do it in a few hours, couldn't you? Just delegate it. And if people say, well, I don't know the creed, I didn't know the creed until we had to do Make Way by Graham Kendrick in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And one of his songs is all about the creed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I'm with you. I didn't know what the creed was.
Rich Mullins, he also does the creed as well in another tune. Yeah, it's just brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Lot to ponder on. And good luck with bringing it through next week, because I feel they're going to be all calling on your door next week saying, please help us out, Colin. And when it comes to delegation, just remember me about sound desks. Thank you. On a serious note, that statement I made right at the beginning, that you thought it was the best thing ever happened to you regarding a heart attack. Tell us more, please.
All my life, I've gone hell for leather at everything. Didn't matter whether it was at school, whether it was the local football club. I had to run it, and I was the secretary, I was the captain, the lot. The local football club, in the local league.
Oh, not Brighton and Hove Albion then?
I used to watch them when they played a midweek game. No, but I was always busy. I did a lot of things, and it's in the family, and I was going up and down to London. If my wife was here listening, she would be applauding and saying, you didn't give enough time to your family. And I'd probably have to put my hand up. But at the same time, our family all got together at Christmas, 33 of us, and we're all good friends and mates. So we didn't do too bad, and we're all talking to one another. But as I went up to London, I was leaving home before 7:15, leaving the office just about before 6, going up to McDonald's, buying a McDonald's, eating it on the train, back home, and then having the meal my wife had cooked for me. And everything was going wrong. And it just happened. And then when I got taken to the hospital, because my secretary said, we've got the ambulance coming, because I collapsed on the floor, they wheeled me in, and the doctor turned to me and he said, this is the best sort of heart attack you can ever have. He said, it's a warning to you that you've got to sort yourself out. And he said, you can do it. And I was back at work within 6 weeks. And to be honest, I've never had any reoccurrence of it at all. It could have been curtains, but at the end of the day, it made me more sensible in doing things that I should not have done, or doing them a little bit slower.
If you could have your time again, certainly in business, let's say, You've already mentioned family, because I take it, therefore, you would scale back certain businesses so you could spend more time with your wife and your family. Looking back on the heart attack, what would you do differently now if you had your time again in certain Christian ministries?
Do you know what? I'm not sure that I would want to change it an awful lot, because I've had a great time. I've had a wonderful time. And I've been able to come alongside people. No, I just thank God for the life he's given me.
Mm.
Through all the changing scenes of life, whether it's ups and downs, I've really enjoyed my life. And I guess one of the most difficult things is handling retirement, because at the end of the day, if you haven't got any big project or purpose in front of you, and in the scriptures it says, spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the problems that I'm kind of going through at the moment. I keep getting ideas come up and want to do this and want to do that. But at the end of the day, I know that I can't and shouldn't. In answer to your question, I don't think I would have changed an awful lot, because God's given me a good life.
But there must have been things that you've learnt in business later on in life, thinking, yeah, if only I'd learnt that or knew that in a previous job, maybe I could have done things differently. What comes to mind on that?
I sold up business when I was 50. And I said that I always would have done. I was employing 100 people at that time. But what I didn't do, I didn't sell it on properly. And this was in the 1990s, 1991, 92, when one of the recessions was around us. Mm-hmm. And the company that bought me out went bust within 3 years. So some of the payout to me didn't come through. But at the end of the day, I would say, in answer to your question, I'd probably make sure that some of the deals I did, I tied them a bit tighter. I was a bit too easy on some people, I think. Always willing to do a discount to get a sale, sort of thing.
Yeah, or maybe even because that bloke's a Christian, therefore it's going to be all right, sort of thing as well.
Yes, sometimes. Here's another interesting thing. I hadn't even thought about this one. We were definitely 6 days a week people. We didn't work on Sundays. Never did. And when I worked once on a Sunday in the print work, my family weren't very keen on that. And then when I got my own printing works, we were given the opportunity to do a job for the Billy Graham organisation. They gave it to us on the Friday night, and they said they wanted delivery on Monday. How the heck do you get that done in that amount of time without working across the whole weekend? And we did. And that was the start of kind of doing 7-day weeks. You've got to be ever so careful how you manage your business. And then when you recognise or realise that fellow Christians around you, people at church, were having to go at me because my company was working on a Sunday. One person, I asked him to finish a job off one evening and work through. And he said, no, he said, I've got to go to the prayer meeting. And I thought, that's no good to me. In fact, I went for 9 years, Martin, without employing. Distinctly, I wouldn't employ a Christian. 9 years, just because they were playing up on me. Don't know whether that answers your question.
It does, because every so often, I hear people saying similar. A very famous evangelist once said that he would refuse to employ a Christian engineer, sound engineer, because he just knew that if he got a non-Christian in, he'd be listening to maybe like 100 hours worth of his stuff going on, that if he doesn't become a Christian by the end of that in a few years' time, there's something seriously wrong. But also, I have heard this time and time again, that there is an attitude with Christians, they don't have this idea of professionalism.
No.
There is a certain level you have to attain, because you have to be better.
Yeah, you do.
I've heard and seen that so many times. I really have.
Yeah.
Very quickly, and before we find out who your Christian hero is, just to tie it all up, that story you gave about the Billy Graham organisation, so they wanted it on Monday. They must have known that you're going to have to work on a Sunday as well. What do you think would have happened if you said, well, no, actually, we don't work on a Sunday? What would have happened?
It'd have gone to somebody else. They would have found somebody. We wouldn't have got the job. I had another one. I'm not going to give his name at all.
No.
He came and he wanted to give me a job, a printing job. And he said, can I come and see you on a Saturday afternoon? And I said, no. I said, I'm out with my family. And I never ever got a job from him. He just went and found somebody else. Fair enough. It was a price I had to pay. But at the end of the day, when you're the buyer, you buy where you want to buy. And you have to realise that too. It's a lot more challenging out there now for Christians.
Yeah.
You go for a job, many a job, and Sunday work is included, isn't it?
Yeah. First question I said all those minutes ago, what advice would you give Christians today starting up a Christian ministry? What would you say to them about Sundays?
Be careful how you handle Sundays. I tell you, I can give you two illustrations on that one, and I think I would probably follow quite similar. At the same time as that Billy Graham stuff was happening, I tell you when it was 1973, Spree 73.
Oh, wow. Long time ago. Yeah.
And the people who are doing the artwork for the Billy Graham organisation were having to work around the clock and across Sundays. And they didn't like it. But what they did, they worked on Sundays. And then when the job was finished, say by Tuesday, they took the day off and went down the beach. And that's the way they got round it. Another organisation, a church down in Chichester, there's a guy, used to be Mike Morris, was down there, and they opened up a church, and they wouldn't have the service in the morning. They have it at 4:00 in the afternoon so that the young people could go and do their shopping and then go to church at 4:00 in the afternoon. I think sometimes we have to be flexible in some of these areas of what we decide we're going to do and not be so dogmatic because something may escape or we'll miss something, miss an opportunity with somebody.
Great answer, thank you. Well, time has beaten us, Colin. It's been phenomenal what you shared so far. We always end every podcast with asking our guest, and you're no exception, as to who your Christian hero is. And it has to be somebody that is dead and also not in the Bible. Colin Saunders, who is your Christian hero, please?
Very easy, and it's my father.
Oh, brilliant. I love it when people choose people like this. Carry on, tell me more. Why, please?
Well, I never knew him until I was 6 because he was in the war. I was born in 1940, and when he came home, I never knew him. But all that I did is I worked alongside him, and he brought me into his business later on. And the example that he set and the Christian life, I mean, he was the one that when I was about 10 or 11, one Sunday night, he took me out. He was preaching at a local chapel, and he let me introduce the hymns in this little chapel. You know, then when I got into business, he used to come along. But I always knew when he was coming. He used to whistle. So I said, why do you whistle? So he said, so that you're not standing there doing nothing. He said, because if you are, pick up a brick and walk with it. He was my hero, still is.
Tell me more about him, first of all, because I love all things Second World War. So what did he do in the war, please?
He was a sign writer. He went in there as a sign writer, but he used to, on the sides of vehicles, when they used to do the coat of arms.
Yeah. The regiments.
Yeah. And he would write their names on. And all he did was sign write.
Wow.
And he went abroad, North Africa. So that's basically what he did.
So it was a safe-ish job, but he was still there.
That's right.
A very important job.
I think his prayers were answered in that he probably didn't want to go to war.
Yeah.
But he got, as you say, he had a safe-ish job.
Yeah. Tell me more about him then. What else should we know about your dad? Obviously, I take it his surname was Saunders, just guessing.
Yeah. Well, he came from a family of 4 or 5. All his brothers and sisters died of heart attacks. He did. He died when he was 69. He was a local preacher. He was as mad as what I was. He used to come and watch me play football. Ran a furnishing business. Knew how to do a deal. When he died, he left, I think, £3 odd because he'd given it all away to us. He dispersed the whole lot.
Wow.
He never paid tax. He was a shrewd old boy. He would go along and tap you on the shoulder and say, I don't think you're doing it the right way. You could do it a different way. I never heard him actually really get cross. Reasonably good preacher. He led the young people. Loved cars. No, he was a good guy.
But the thing is, he set the scene up for his son.
Yeah, he did.
To go further.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. Something you just said there, because my Christian hero is George Muller from Germany and then based in Bristol. He obviously thought that his time of life, he was retiring, and he retired at sort of 70, something like that. And he thought that's the end of his life. And in fact, that's when God tapped him on the shoulder, thought, if you think you're retiring, watch this. And he went around the world twice.
Really?
Yeah. Almost died in India. His wife had to look after him on a train. People would know more about George Muller in his retirement years than he did for what he did in Bristol that he's renowned for.
Yes.
The same thing is with you. You know, look at your retirement years. Look what you've been able to do in retirement. You haven't put your feet up because you said your brain's still going.
Yeah.
Right at the very beginning when you talked about Joseph.
Yeah.
Yeah, look what happened to him. Just when he thought, and this is an encouragement for those listening today who are really going through it, this could actually be your Egypt time where you're actually having to learn, trust who God is because he's got something better for you.
That's right. That's right. Good.
Colin Saunders, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an incredible time. You've given us loads of things to ponder on, which can only be good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Martin.
And if you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, please do. It means a lot. Thank you ever so much indeed. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
I didn't want to die physically. Obviously, my kids were still in their 20s and had a lot of life to live. And certainly, you know, it was a terrible shock for Kathy, you know, having to sort of see her husband going through all this rubbish. My attitude became, well, you know, God is with me no matter what. And that was my sort of theological stance. I didn't have any bitterness or anger or frustration. I just thought, well, it is what it is. And whether you're a Christian or not, life is life. And we don't know what's around the corner. And so, again, I tried to live through that because a lot of people in the church couldn't understand how you're the pastor of the church. Yeah. Why are you so ill? Some Christians couldn't understand because their theology is you pray, you believe, and God heals. Well, that's a great place to be, but it's not always reality.
So please join me with our very special guest, former club captain of Luton Town Football Club and then subsequent pastor of Luton Christian Fellowship, Alan West. And what a gentleman he is, and what a podcast too. Until then, cheerio.